You could remove your own soldiers from harm's way and impose cost on an adversary with little or no money expenditures in terms of especially the sustainment and maintenance of these low cost, highly attritable, commercially available weapons. And that's the second point, is that we see real cost impositions between adversaries such that we would have maybe even a great power that would use multi-million-dollar missiles to take down a small commercially available drone that cost a fraction of the price. And so for these and other reasons, I think this is an indication that we have to pace this emerging threat both at home and abroad to maintain lethal overmatches, the doctrinal term you would use in a military context.
In the meantime, let's return to another story developing tonight. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed that Britain is shifting its military strategy towards drone warfare as the long-delayed Defence Investment Plan is finally unveiled tomorrow. Some of the details we have so far: the news that ageing Royal Navy destroyers are going to be scrapped, more than £5 billion from the government's Defence Investment Plan, going instead to automated technology like drones. Ministers say the blueprint learns directly from the front line in Ukraine. The critics worry that reliance on cheap drones is a cover for managed military decline. Let's speak to Paul Lushenko, who is a senior fellow at the Cornell University Brooks School of Tech Policy Institute and the author of The Legitimacy of Drone Warfare, Evaluating Public Perceptions, Drones and Global Order. What I think it's fair to say that what Paul doesn't know about drones isn't worth knowing. Paul, do you think then, with your vast experience, that this is the right pivot from the government?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here with your listenership. So I wouldn't want to comment on the specifics of the UK policy, but what I would tell you, which is consistent with what is happening in the US military across the pond, is that this is a reflection of the shifting character, if not nature, of warfare, which is to say how and why countries fight.
Okay. Let's return to the sort of origin point of this then, which is lessons from the front line of Ukraine. The government are directly quoting what's happening in Eastern Europe at the moment as being inspiration for their defence policy. What insights and lessons are they specifically?
So I think there's a couple key insights that we can pull from the sort of broader understanding of so-called drone warfare, and that's a loaded concept in itself that we could take another hour or two on the radio talking about. But I think the implications first and foremost is the extension of operational reach on the battlefield, which is to say that you could remove your own soldiers from harm's way and impose cost on an adversary with little or no money expenditures in terms of especially the sustainment and maintenance of these low cost, highly attritable, commercially available weapons. And that's the second point, is that we see real cost impositions between adversaries such that we would have maybe even a great power that would use multi-million-dollar missiles to take down a small commercially available drone that cost a fraction of the price. And so for these and other reasons, I think this is an indication that we have to pace this emerging threat both at home and abroad to maintain lethal overmatches, the doctrinal term you would use in a military context.
Okay, so just to be clear on that, Paul, that's saying that it is your advancements in this technology, which are more frequently being used in warfare, offset a bit by how easy and cheap it is to develop for your enemies, basically, to develop anti-drone capabilities.
That's exactly right. And so what we're seeing in Ukraine is a microcosm of this cost imposition, this cost exchange ratio that most defense experts, to include myself, believe is the wave of the future in terms of battlefield sort of operations going forward.
How do we grapple then with the sort of ethical questions about autonomous weapons? They raise difficult questions, don't they, about decision making in conflict?
Well, that's a whole can of worms that, again, we could talk at great length about. I think it's important to go back to policies that govern these lethal autonomous weapon systems, if we want to use that term. I've also heard them and have used the term killer robots myself. It is the stated policy of the United States at this point to retain appropriate human judgment over these capabilities, which means a human in the so-called loop for decision making. For better or for worse, the United States is leading the effort globally through regional forums to attempt to align policies across key allies and partners, to include the United Kingdom, to adopt this policy as well. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the UK Ministry of Defence has done so as well in the recent past.
I also wonder if we've got a bit of an example of how you need a flexibility in your in what you have as a military with the Strait of Hormuz, because all of a sudden whether we liked it or not, one of our allies needed help. And actually some of our British flagged ships needed help on the sea, and we didn't have the Navy capability to be able to get to them quick enough. Was that a sort of a red flag about what direction we take our military in?
Well, what I think it indicates, as opposed to a red flag, is the inflection point for modernization, for modern conflict on the modern battlefield, which is defined as proliferations of sensors and effectors to include drones, of course, that are augmented with AI to impose costs. And so I think one of the great fallacies of so-called algorithmic warfare or agentic warfare is that it's either or in terms of the tool du jour, which is AI-enabled capabilities such as drones, or a retention of classical great power machinery to include boats, airplanes, so on and so forth. And the reality is we prepare for a range of military operations across what we call the spectrum of conflict, to include irregular warfare, to include limited conflict, which I would argue is taking place in Iran right now for a variety of reasons, to include great power conflict. And so it's really optimizing the mix of these capabilities that would allow you flexibility, agility to respond at a particular time and place with the right capabilities.
And some people say there is a future where crude military assets disappear entirely. I suspect from your answer there you don't agree.
I don't, for a lot of reasons that I've studied deeply and continue to write and research on. First and foremost is there's a huge trust issue among the military, certainly in the United States, and we're carrying this research forward for AI-enabled decision support systems, all the way to lethal autonomous weapon systems as well. And then certainly because of the moral and ethical implications of use of force decision making, we would want appropriate human judgment for all the ethical and moral reasons that we've brought up here, at least implicitly. So going forward, I think, again, the stated policy is we will have human oversight for these capabilities. Now, the one wrinkle that I talk to students across the military about is the importance of national security interest. At what point does your interest become a vulnerability against another peer adversary that is potentially adopting these capabilities with limited or no human oversight? That's a political decision, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But for all intents and purposes, right now, the stated policy is for human oversight for the moral and ethical reasons that a lot of people have talked about.
Crikey, that is a thorny path, isn't it? Okay, we'll talk about other sort of major powers then. We've talked a lot about the US. You've referenced the US a lot. But let's think about China, Russia, also through Europe too, and Asia. How does Britain's sort of pivot here and our plan compare to other major powers and what they are doing with their military?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It brings us in the realm of what we call international political economy, so the study of things across borders, as well as comparative analysis across different countries with different regimes. And so, broadly speaking, when you take a look at the United States vis-a-vis the UK and Europe generally vis-a-vis China, you're going to get distinct pathways for the adoption of military capabilities such as AI and AI-enabled drones. In the United States, I think it's fair to say, given our sort of laissez-faire economic system, free market capitalism, that we're really encouraging companies to conduct the best of breed capabilities based upon perceived first mover advantages. In a military context, what that comes down to is a pretty loaded term called the sensor to shooter timeline, that we could identify a target quicker than an adversary, apply an effect, and because of that have battlefield advantages. When we start to broaden it to take a look at European countries like the UK and like Germany, there's a little bit more hesitation for a variety of cultural reasons. Germany is a great case in point here. UK is now turning a corner as well, and mostly because it wants to align in terms of interoperability, or at least in part, with the United States. And then finally would be China and its party state, which is really state-owned enterprises that are driving the development here, to the point where potentially some of the regulatory guardrails that you would anticipate in the UK and Germany and the United States may not, in fact, be there. And so really the development of AI globally is checkered by the particular regime type within a country. I think what we're seeing between the United States and UK at this point is shared interest in ensuring preparedness for future warfare. All defense experts, to include myself, most of them at least, believe the adoption of AI is inevitable. So we ought to embrace it and prepare to meet these threats, lest we be unprepared and we go the way of the Spanish sort of Civil War and other sort of historical examples where key vulnerabilities were identified, but were not pursued in terms of filling the gap.
Okay, Paul, terrific insight. Thank you so much. Good to talk to you. Paul Lushenko, who is a senior fellow at the Cornell University Brooks School of Tech Policy Institute and the author of the book, The Legitimacy of Drone Warfare.